Hey, good evening, everyone. Another Tuesday evening. I hope you're well and warm. Very cold here in cold Sheffield, and I guess it's cold in other parts of the country. But obviously, if you're down south, it's kind of warm. So, just going to wait for the first person to give me a notification, and then we're going to be ready to go this evening. Unprotected working, or working unprotected. And we'll say a little bit more about that. So, welcome if you're watching our catch up a few days later, a few days or a few weeks later. Um, good evening, Sonia. Yeah, if you can hear me, good to go. I'm ready for the off. I've got the bit in my mouth and I'm ready. So we're going to be looking at either unprotected working or working unprotected. This was a question that was asked 2 or 3 weeks ago by one of the regulars. We're looking at toxic work environments and how we navigate that. And I use the word navigate intentionally, because navigate means to plot a course, to plot a path. So you're intentional about it. So we're looking at that this evening. So this all started off in well-being, but we're looking at just something slightly different. My name is Delroy Hall. I am the co-founder and CEO of Delroy Consultancy, over 3 decades experience of leadership experience and working as a therapist and a lecturer. So I'm involved in that organization. So these sessions that I have done over the past few years now, no substitute going to the GP, going to a doctor, and certainly today we're looking at the work environment, and this is no substitute for you going to a union or finding things out for yourself. And I'll say a bit more about that towards the end. Interestingly, I just happened to mention something today about toxic workplaces, and the training I was on today, the individual said, yeah, there's a lot of that still about, and it certainly is, working in difficult environments and so forth. So the question was asked about what happens if you're working remotely and you may not be covered by HR policies. You remember things have changed significantly since COVID-19. That's right, COVID-19. Some places are really, really good. Some places are on the ball. Many places are not. And I'm going to give us some hints and tips what we can do to ensure that we are well protected. So I'm not going to get into specifics, but I heard a story. I spoke to a friend of mine down south, and I told him what I was doing. He says, yeah, Delroy, says, I met somebody recently, owns a printing firm, and they've got quite a few members of staff, maybe 20, maybe 40, and no HR whatsoever. And this guy's a bit of a practical joker, so he was doing stuff. So he called in some HR people to explore the possibility of bringing the services and so forth. And he told them some of the things that he did, and they said, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And he said he just thought it was a bit of fun. And he just said, well, he sent them packing through the door. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, here's a group of work people, maybe. And he said some of the, my friend said he said some of the things about how he talks to them. So maybe he has a set of workers who are left vulnerable, trusting that he will have their best interests at heart. That may not be so. So it's about taking control in your own hands. That's absolutely mega, mega important. So today we'll be looking at some of this unsafe practices, and then obligations that we have, and then we'll be looking at what you can do to ensure that you are covered. You know the law. There's places you can go to get the information that you need. Absolutely important. Do not, gosh, it sounds really awful, but do not trust your employer to know everything about employment law. It's good for you to get the knowledge for yourself. Good evening, Jenny. We're answering your question of a few days ago of remote learning. In fact, I mentioned, as an aside, I mentioned to somebody today in terms of what I was doing. So she said, how are the topics chosen? Well, it starts off with me, but then I said, recently somebody asked a question. I wasn't too sure, did some exploration around it, and this is what I'll be sharing this evening. So unsafe working conditions, dangerous machinery. And there's kind of there's problems with chemicals and poor lighting, poor ventilation, that they are unsafe or not good working environment, and there is a legal protection. Good evening, Sandra, good to see you this evening. They employers have a legal obligation to ensure that your working environment is good and in tip-top shape. Also, one of the things that companies don't have sometimes, and it was a massive thing, wasn't it, during lockdown, lack of PPE, lack of protective equipment that's needed to protect the employees. That's really important. So there's a difference between unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. There's a two. So the unsafe acts are employers, they might ask you to work a machine. It hasn't got the protective shields on it, and they ask you to operate machines in an unsafe way. That's unsafe acts. But unsafe conditions are some of the following: the physical hazards, slippery floor, wet floor, things that are broken, biological hazard in terms of mold, insects, rodent infestation. Employers have a legal obligation to ensure that you're not experiencing these things. Chemicals, so are you being exposed to pesticides or chemicals, cleaning things that cleaning chemicals that's going to damage your health and your skin and so forth. And there's ergonomics. Is the work safe? Is the workspace safe? Your desk, lighting, are you positioned well? Are you working in an environment that if you keep working on your laptop the way you do, you're going to end up with repetitive wrist injuries or a bad back for being hunched up. So all these are ergonomics in terms of how your body is in the environment, and also psychosocial hazards, bullying, harassment, toxic work culture. All these things people experience, and we have to ensure that we are looking after ourselves. So the NI Direct Government Services said that employers have responsibility for the health and safety of their employees and any visitors to their premises. So one, there's the reason why we take out public liability insurance, but also employers have a responsibility to look after their workforce and anybody who visits the premises. That's the employer's responsibility. Also, as employees, we have a legal obligation. I'm not going to mention this today, but one of the things I'm talking about next week and the next couple of weeks after that is moral injury. That's incredibly important, and I want to really kind of do a deep dive into moral injury over the next couple of weeks. So you and I have a legal obligation to, good evening, sound engineer. Really good to see you this evening. If you can check me on YouTube as well, that'd be really good. Thank you. So legal obligation to report certain types of incidents in workplaces to the relevant authorities. So there's some things we cannot turn the blind eye to, even if your employer says you must. So what are some of these things? Work-related deaths. We need to, if the company's not going to do it now, I'd like to think that every company would, but if companies don't want to do it, you have a legal obligation to do so. Major injuries or injuries over 3 days, you have a legal obligation to report it to the relevant authorities. Work-related diseases, again, we have a legal obligation to report to work colleagues and so forth. And dangerous near misses. Employers may want to turn a blind eye, but you cannot. And I just want to give you an example of reporting near misses. There's an excellent book called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Said. Black Box Thinking by Matthew Said. He was the three times world table tennis champion, based here in the UK. Wrote this excellent book taken from the black box, as you know, is the kind of recording device that's held in the tail of airplanes. So any near miss or minor incident or major, there's this mad scramble for the black box to it gives a report of everything that's taken place. Electrical pulses, how the captain and co-pilot was talking to each other and so forth. And he says that what's happened in the aviation industry, the reason why it's so safe, they've had to do two things: change the culture, but also change the culture in such a way that people were allowed to report every single incident without fear of being dismissed, sacked, or suspended. What that did, everything was reported and then it was investigated. And he said the reason why it's so safe is that every single thing is investigated thoroughly. There's new findings, new results, and the new results are implemented, new training and so forth is implemented, so to ensure that the industry is safe. And you and I have a legal obligation to report near misses. Now, you might say, well, I could lose my job. Now listen to this. Many must remember the Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans. Now, The hurricane wasn't worse than any other time. But there was an individual whose name escapes me, and this is all factual. He told the authorities a few years on the trot, you need to sort out these dams, otherwise they will be breached. What did they do? They sacked him. And you and I, perhaps we'll be here long enough. There's been people who've been making noises about certain things. They had a legal responsibility in terms of their job. They reported the incident. What companies did? They got rid of them. And then a few years later, what they said would happen has happened, and it's been catastrophic. So we have a legal obligation to report near misses and so forth. That's really important in terms of places of work. We go there every day and we're very, very trusting, but sometimes we need to grab the reins for ourselves. Now, this is a right. Psychosocial hazard. Wow, some places are like walking through a field of landmines where people try to warn you, but there are dangers very well hidden. Yes, question, will this foster an environment of not taking risks, being in fear, and not wanting to share innovative ideas or to share previously earned good practice? Absolutely. Listen, that's a serious question. I'm going to hold it up there for a bit longer. I'm going to say a little bit about that in a moment. Fantastic question. Listen, where there is an environment where people do not feel safe to work, you will not get good leadership, because the leaders will be watching their backs to see who's going to stab them in it. So the question, will this foster an environment of not taking risks? Absolutely. Now, here's my 4 things about leadership. I'm very clear about leadership, very, very clear about leadership. Some people see leadership as bullying and being dictatorial. No, leadership, very clear. Service, you're serving people. You're not a dictator, you're not a bully, you're not authoritarian, you're there to serve people. Number 2, innovation, creativity. If the environment is not there, leaders will not be creative or inventive. Managers keep things together. They make sure things are done right. Leaders look at alternative ways, creative ways of doing new things. That's what leaders do. Number 3, leaders are there. It's interesting. Simon Sinek says this. He's quite right. He says, what a lot of employers ask is that, what can we do? What can we do to get the most out of people? As though we want to wring the life out of people. But he said, no. As leaders and organization, you create the environment so people will give off their best, so you have commitment and not compliance. So leadership for me, serving the people, innovation, creativity, new ideas, pushing boundaries. Number 3, creating psychological safety. And number 4, developing the people around you. And if you're not doing that as a leader, I don't know what you are. You're certainly not a leader. But these 4 things, whether it's big business, third sector, public sector, wherever it might be, these are, for me, the 4 main categories of leadership. And if you're a leader listening to this and you want to know how to do it, you're not too sure, oh, look, let me just put this here. Email me or DM me on Messenger, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you, because this is absolutely important. So let me just go back to let's go back down to here. Yeah, brilliant question. Thank you very much for that, Jenny. Hopefully that's answered your question. If it's not, please come back to me. But yeah, brilliant question. Yeah, if the environment is not safe, people will not take risks. Leaders won't take risks. And then what happens if you're a leader? In fact, this is what happened. If you're a leader and in an environment which is unsafe, you do one of 2 things. You'll either keep your head under the parapet or you'll leave. But leaders can't keep their head under the parapet for long, because they get bored and they get frustrated, and then they leave an organization because they can't function in that environment because it's too toxic. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Please let me know, yay or nay. Brilliant question though. So now, in terms of what we're looking at this evening, welcome. If you're just joining us 10, 15 minutes in, we're looking at working unprotected, what we can do. Some of the work environments that we're in are not very good. And even then, sometimes I'm going to say something now which might not go down too well, but I would really encourage us to make sure that it happens. So in some places, HR is not brilliant. And sometimes if something happens, people can tell you stuff just off the top of it, just off the cuff. One of the things you need to do to ensure that it's factual, you ask HR, can you show me? Where is it written in the policy so I can see it? And if they say, well, you need to look, this is where you find it, you go and look and read for yourself. If you can't find it, ask them to show you. If there's a delay, you then need to do something about getting the information that's needed. There's an excellent video on LinkedIn. Alison McDermott, some of you may remember that Sellafield, the nuclear plant, were in the news about a year or so ago for a toxic work culture. They invited her in as a business consultant. She lasted 18 months. They got rid of her. She said some of the stuff was alarming. If anybody wants it, I can certainly give the link, but you can find it. Alison McDermott, Sellafield. If you go online, there'll be a kind of 2 or 3 minute video that will come up. And she said, and this is what she said. Now the staff, I just Googled the amount of people they have working there, 11,000 people. And she said less than 11% of the workforce trust the leadership. That's really, really bad. 11% of the workforce trust the leadership. And there's 11,000 staff. That is not good at all. So if there's that environment, you then can't feel safe or protected. So what do? One, if you have the union, you get the union involved, and hopefully the union will do the stuff that they need to do. Okay, so I'm going to park that. We're going to come back to that in a moment. As an employee, need to know your rights. Now, thank you for the question, Jenny, because I didn't even know this. If you're working for an agency, you need to find out from them, are you an employee or a worker? Because those two are different categories, and you'll be affected differently by law in terms of pay, holiday, and so forth. So you need to find out. So I remember listening to somebody recently, and they were working for agencies, and I wasn't too sure what was going on. They weren't treated very well. And it's since doing a bit of research, if you're a worker or an employee, you're treated differently by law. And sometimes I guess what some agencies might do, you get to week 7 or 8 and they lay you off for a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and they bring you back. What happens at week 12? They have this, what they call a minimum kind of minimum work agreement. So then once you're in the same organization or same assignment for 12 consecutive weeks, the legality changes around you, which affects your pay, holiday pay, time off, sick, and so forth. So you need to find all these things out. If you're working for an agency, if you know somebody's working for an agency, ask them, are you an employee or a worker? And ask them to find out from the agency. It is really important. So pay, holidays, sick leave, working hours, and so forth. Now there's a whole thing around zero contract hours, where you know that with the zero contract hours, that the employer is under no obligation to offer you any work, but also you don't have the responsibility to accept the work either. But it's a kind of crazy situation, because if you're on zero contract hours, in a sense, you can't build a good future because you're not too sure if you're going to have a work the next week or not. That's another category altogether. So you're in a workplace, you're seeing some dodgy stuff, you've seen how HR deals with certain individuals, they conspire stuff and out on the ear. Oh, goodness me, woo! Right. Jenny says that, yes, answer the question. Also, some of the best ideas come from people on the ground dealing with the service users, customers. Unfortunately, middle managers may be the ones trying to control the work environment. Yes, they may be the ones who don't deal with the toxic environment, as they are trying to hide it from the leaders, and people please the ones they manage. Listen, this is what Alison McDermott said right at the very end of the interview. Brilliant interview. She said this, and this happens right across the piece. She said, the people who created the mess, who presided over the mess, who covered up the mess, cannot be the same people to change the mess. I have never forgotten those words, powerful words. The people who created the mess, who presided over the mess, who covered up the mess, are not the ones to change the mess. So you're right, sometimes middle management are fearful and they really kind of put the spanner in the works. And quite often it's to do with insecurity. There's a whole range of things. It's never one thing. Insecurity. Some people like the status. They want to know that they're the kind of kingpin. But you made the right you made the right call, Jenny. Managers are different from leaders. Leaders do not maintain the status quo. Leaders are progressive, forward thinking, doing new things, trying new things, trying, failing, and going again. Managers, generally speaking, I think I put it in my article, they kind of not much toe the line, but they make sure that things are done right. So if the policy said this is what managers do. But leaders say, yeah, it does this, but let's see if we can create something a bit different, something freer, and so forth. So yeah, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. That's really, really helpful. So what do you do? This is really important. What do you really do? You're seeing things that you're not happy with. You're not too sure how your situation is. And it could be that you may not like working with a company, but you like the workforce you're with, because that can happen. You don't like the company, you don't like the leadership, you don't like the organization and how it's structured, but you fell in with a really good group of people. We're in this kind of trauma together, so you help each other out. You've got a really good workforce. So what do you do? What you do if you can't get stuff from HR, this is what you do. Get to ACAS. ACAS stands for Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service. Google it, ACAS, ACAS. I've used them once many years ago when I was involved with a nursery. Conciliation means a way of solving a legal dispute without going to trial. And arbitration is a matter comes up, it's given to an arbitrator. He or she listens to the facts. He makes a binding agreement which the parties have to adhere to. Okay, so that's arbitration. So it's a procedure in which a dispute, as I said before, I don't need to repeat myself. So mediation is different from arbitration because mediation is about two people or group of people with a mediator get together and they try to resolve it themselves. An arbitrator is somebody who's given all the evidence from the parties. He or she reads information. Now, this is kind of surface level stuff. I'm sure it's a lot deeper than that. Read information, and based on the information they have and all with the law, they make a binding agreement which both parties have to agree to. So ACAS, go on the website, and I'll tell you, I would encourage you and encourage your friends if you have them to spend some time looking at ACAS. They have some free webinars. They've got stuff around conflict management, mediation, internal work conflicts. They've got stuff around inclusion. They've got training around the menopause and inclusion. Some really good stuff. Some of it's free. You can sign up to a newsletter, but all the information there is free. And in fact, if you need to speak to somebody, as it happened a few years ago, you can call people. So basically what ACAS do, they work with employees and employers to ensure that there's a good working relationship. That's what ACAS do. It's free. It's funded by the government. So you just go online, you do the searches, and it's about you being knowledgeable about your rights as an employee. So if anything should happen, you know what your rights are. I think I shared with you some time ago my friend from abroad who was studying at a university, and they wouldn't get rid of him, and it was very plain they wouldn't get rid of him. They had a meeting arranged that they knew he was they knew that he was abroad, and what happened? Yeah, what happened now? Yeah, he came for the meeting unsuspected, and what he'd done before he got to the meeting, he ate, slept policies and procedures for students. He almost memorized it, and when he came to the meeting, every argument they put forward, they said yes. He said yes, but this is what your procedures said. Da 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 da, and he won his point, and he got a year's tuition, overseas tuition, refunded because the university admitted liability that he'd not been looked after as well as he should have done. So it's about knowing the law. Quite often people are not too keen on not too bothered about your emotions, even though I read something quite recently about an Asian professor at a university who had been doing a job for 5 years, and when she applied for the job, she wasn't selected. Somebody less senior than her. Also, she was an Asian professor, and this person was a white academic. Whole heap of stuff kicked off. Anyway, the courts found that the university was liable, £480,000, I think, and I think she's owed maybe just a bit more in terms of the distress and the trauma and so forth, not being treated properly. So it goes on all the time, even with large institutions. I would say to anybody, and what we do, we go to workplaces, don't we? And we trust the organization. I would say to anybody listening live, or you know somebody in a difficult situation, or you're listening to this, you're scrolling, you just happen to see this, do not place your future in anybody else's hands. Certainly your workplace future, have that in your own hands. And so there's a body out there. The union is one thing, great, but it's good you having knowledge for yourself. You know the law, you know your rights. So if somebody says something to you, you can offer a counter argument to what they're suggesting to you. So listen. So finally, do your research. Know stuff about zero contract hours. If you've got a zero contract hours, find out from ACAS what your rights are. Many places will feel as though you haven't got any rights, but what are your rights? So that you're covered by law if anything should happen, or somebody from HR management says something to you. Either you ask them, can you show me? Can you show me in your policies where it says that? And if they can't show you, then question mark needs to come up, a red flag needs to come up. Or there's a delay getting information to you, there's a red flag. If they can't show you where the information is, that's a red flag. Find the information out for yourself. And I've known individuals who have really stood up to workplaces and defended themselves really, really well, because they know their knowledge. They've got themselves jammed up with the law and how the law affects them. So listen, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much indeed. Great question a few weeks ago, Jenny. And I'm going to be looking at some stuff around moral injury. It's mega important. So love the questions for tonight about if you don't have a safe environment, leaders are not going to be leaders won't lead. Simple as that. You'll be leaders in name only. But if the environment is toxic, all alleged leaders will do, they might actually book against the system. But sometimes what can happen, if you book against the system too much, you're told in no uncertain terms to stop what you're doing or your career's ended. And I've known individuals who've wanting to see people treated better, and they make comments and they make noises. This is around inclusion. This is around mental well-being and so forth. And these individuals have been told in no uncertain terms, in a conversation in the corridor, not in a meeting, if you continue pushing this line of conversation, your future here will be stymied. This is as far as you're going to go. And then people have a choice to make whether or not they stay and they keep quiet, or they stay and they keep pushing until they are sacked. But then sometimes what happens, people stay, keep pushing, and then the whole thing about moral injury comes into play. It's not a pretty sight. So I'll say more about that over the next couple of weeks. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay warm, stay safe, and see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your week. See you next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. All being well. Take care. Thanks for the questions again, and thank you for taking the time. And even if you're watching on catch up, thank you for taking the time to listen in. Hope you found it really, really helpful. If you need to get hold of me, there's my email, and or DM me to ask further questions or just to give some signposting. More than happy to do that. Go well. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.